Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden Podcast is brought to you by BCS America.
BCS two-wheel tractors power dozens of professional quality, PTO-driven attachments for soil working, mowing, property maintenance, snow removal, and more. BCS tractors are famous for their durability and versatility, with handlebars that rotate 180 degrees for front and rear mount implements. And now, BCS has introduced a game changer in the two-wheel tractor world, Model 770 with hydrostatic drive. Model 770's easy grip lever enables the operator to precisely select ground speed and direction of travel without the need to shift or vary the throttle. This is extremely useful for heavy mowing or snow clearing jobs where constant changes in direction or speed are necessary. Now you can keep the flail mower running at full RPM while you mow forward, reverse, and forward again, all without the need to shift or re-engage the PTO. The hydrostatic Model 770 is on sale now. Check out bcsamerica.com for sale pricing and to find your nearest dealer. That's bcsamerica.com.
Today's show is also brought to you by Growers Co, and there are only a few days left to use that 15% off discount code for orders over $150. That includes all clothing, tools, accessories, and the magazine. Such amazing stuff. If nothing else, buy everyone you love a copy of the magazine and maybe a straw hat just for kicks. I mentioned how much I love that straw hat and really everything at Growers & Co. Anyway, that offer code is No-Till-Growers15, all one word, no caps, the number 15. I will put it in the show notes as well. The offer code is valid through December 30th, 2020. It can be used at growers.co, which, for the uninitiated, is a clothing, tool, and apparel company founded by Jean-Martin Fortier, the market gardener himself. They make clothing for growers who do precisely the kind of work we talk about on this podcast. If you are a market gardener or an aspiring one, Growers & Co. has designed their products around your needs. The goal of Growers & Co. is to be a brand that represents the dignity, skills, and creativity required to do this work. Learn more or use that code, again, No-Till-Growers15 at growers.co. All right, let's jam. Hey, you all, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to the No-Till Market Garden Podcast, episode 11, season 3. Got a great episode for you this week with Zach Kennedy and Kasey Crispin of Prima Farm, just north of Reno, Nevada. I was super excited to talk to these two for a number of reasons. They farm in the high desert, and I haven't had too many folks on in the podcast who do that. But there are a lot of complications that come with it. In fact, their elevation is like 5,260 feet. So it's roughly almost a mile, and their weather fluctuations are really intense. So we talk about how they mitigate that. We talk about how Zach worked for many years as a produce manager, and tips he learned for post-harvest handling in that job. We talk about their high-yielding carrot beds and so much more. But before we get into it, a couple of things. Make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you are getting it. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the brand new No-Till Flowers podcast with host Jenny Love of Love and Fresh Flowers. We just released 3 episodes this week. There will be another one on Wednesday and every Wednesday for a while, but you can get the full picture of what the podcast will be like by listening to those first 3. But it has a different feed, so you have to go to the No-Till Flowers feed. Don't also think that you need to be a flower farmer to gain insight from this. I've gained a ton of insight and information from listening to all these conversations so far and editing this podcast. It's really amazing. A lot of bed prep stuff, a lot of soil talk, a lot of perennial bed management. It's very cool stuff. Anyway, go subscribe, and that's enough from me. Let's get into this amazing conversation with Zach and Kasey of Prema Farm. Zach Kennedy, Kasey Crispin, welcome to the podcast.
Nice to be here.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thanks so much for having us, man. We're honored.
Yeah, and I'm honored to have you all on. I'm super excited to chat with somebody because I don't think I've had anybody on in your region. So maybe we could sort of start there. Could you give us a rundown of your farm, where you're located, how much land you're working on, and those sorts of things?
Yeah. So we're 12 miles north as the crow flies from Reno, and tucked into the eastern Sierras. We farm at about 5,260 feet, in a roughly 90-day growing season typically. I mean, this year we got an extra about 45 days on the fall end, which was unexpected. But yeah, it's a pretty wild climate. We actually found a lot up here that is. I mean, the topsoil is probably about 4.5 to 5 feet deep in some places because the sediment from the two mountains that are nearby, all the topsoil kind of ran down and then built up right where the farm lies. And so it's an old river basin. It's relatively rock free. And yeah, we focus a lot on protected culture stuff because we have such a short growing window, and yeah, and are in a pretty delicate environment as far as just the weather fluctuations, temperature fluctuations, and unpredictable seasonality is probably like some of the most difficult things that we deal with for sure.
Yeah, and I do want to hear a little bit more about that fluctuating about your climate in a minute. But first, could you give us like a little bit of the sort of origin story of the farm?
Yeah, absolutely. So we had, when Zach and I first met, within the first few hours, we were already talking about a mutual desire to grow food. And he had just gotten back from, 6 years of extended travel around the world. He had visited 60 plus countries and kind of came back with this desire to get his hands into the earth. And I was actually on my way out. We met kind of in passing at a festival. I was flying one way to Hawaii to woof on some farms and centers over there. And when we reconnected, when I came back to the States, it was on our minds and it was on our tongue, but we hadn't made any real concrete plans, and we didn't have any confirmed desire of where we wanted to land. But Zach ended up working with a local food co-op and became the produce manager. And our network of friends through the co-op and just through other avenues, it constantly created conversation around starting a farm, at our dinner parties or whatnot. And so eventually we just, all of us being strapped with full-time obligations, to whatever job, be it at the co-op or whatever else, we just decided to go for it. And so we started doing soil tests around town in terms of finding a plot that we could lease. And we tested the plot that we're on now, even though it was 30 minutes drive time north of where we were all located. And fairly remote we were originally thinking an urban farm, so it seemed much farther than we had anticipated, but the soil tests spoke for themselves. And there's also, it's very picturesque out here because we're just hugging the foothills of the Eastern Sierra. And so the landscape is really charming. And so between that and then the soil test, we decided to land on this 1.5-acre plot, which is part of a parcel that our friend owns, which is a 150-acre parcel. So there's large lots out here, and most of it is zoned as agriculture and it's ranchland. And originally, this, as Zach mentioned, this was a riverbed, but long after that, it was a single family-owned alfalfa ranch. So the nitrogen content just in the soil for a long time has been wonderful, and our neighbors are relatively unconventional. I won't quite call them organic, but they're certainly not full-on conventional. And we have the benefit of having just a natural buffer zone that allowed for us to become certified organic seamlessly. And and then it kind of took off from there. And then within the first year, we didn't really have a full season that first year. That was in 2016. It was just kind of this patchwork effort to erect a greenhouse together and learn all the technologies that we had no idea about. We were reading, collectively, The Market Gardener by Jean-Martin Fortier, and we had the benefit of interacting with him at a small farm conference nearby that same year. And so that helped kind of our trajectory that first year, but we weren't really productive. We certainly were nowhere near profitable, and it was very much like waiting for one of us really to quit their day job and make it like their full-time thing. And Zach and I started a family in that first year, which was, I don't recommend that. So Zach decided he was going to take the plunge, and it was really just, it was very serendipitous, the timing of it all, because right when Zach was ready to leave the co-op and really go full time into the farm. Our friends who we had collectively started the farm with, they were all planning to leave and go on like extended travel vacations, and so we ended up just taking the business over from there. And Zach, he literally built like 90% of the infrastructure that we use on the farm in the winter of 2016, 2017. And I mean, would literally come home with bloody hands because he had, just been in the stark cold building a cold storage or whatever else. And then from there, we just took off. Yeah.
That's great. Maybe you said this, forgive me, are you leasing that land?
Yeah, we're leasing it with the opportunity to buy, should that present itself as the right course for us. It's a bit of a budding intentional community on this property, and so our approach to that is very kind of soft and organic, and just making sure that that's the type of lifestyle that we want to really invest heavily into. But for now, we lease, yes.
Okay, and are you commuting too, or you live there on the property?
Yeah, we just moved out to the farm about a year ago from this month. We built a tiny home out on the farm, and now we live on the property, which is much easier.
Yeah. Travel time, it eats up time really quickly. Zach, one direction I kind of want to go is asking you about being a produce manager before starting a farm. Were there things that being a produce manager that you got to bring with you from that job?
Oh, it was incredible. I mean, like originally I was really inspired by Ray Allen. I think his name is, from Growing Power, and what he was doing with aquaponics in the Midwest. And I'm like, oh, you could be this productive and bring this much food out of a greenhouse, and especially in our environment. I was thinking like that was the way to go. But the further we got into it, I realized that it wasn't. And I started to see like what the demand was here for locally grown produce just as a whole. And like I was going, we developed the food shed at that time essentially, and defined it with our walker, or within the river basin that Reno lives within, and we teamed up with the family that had pretty much started the co-op, and kind of boosted the whole food system, and got as many producers online as we could, and tried to get as much access to local food as we could, and tried to define a lot of roles in the food system by getting like someone to grow so much of this because we knew that we needed this much of this at this time of the year, and like tried to help enhance these crop plans to give all these farmers sure sales. But it really came back as being almost unproductive, because everybody was kind of defining the roles. The average age of the farmer up here is probably the same as across the rest of the U.S., 65 or 70 years old. And a lot of the families like not interested in taking that property on or continuing to do it. And so I got a huge, perfect glimpse into our food system and like all the gaps in it. And then I also got to learn how to like cull vegetables, and how to, keep things super fresh and looking perfect, and like the ideal size of bunches, and appearance wise, aesthetically, what people were really looking for. So it gave the farm a huge jump start into, not having to guess what we were going to grow to make it so that the farm could be sustainable, and realizing that demand. And like Kasey stated, in that first year, we literally came out and we knew that nobody grew local cabbage, nobody grew local kale. So we threw in like, I don't know, probably a half acre of outdoor stuff. And literally like at some points we would only come out to the farm once a week, maybe once every 4 or 5 days, like at 7 p.m. and just trying as hard as we could to get out here and just to check on things, to see like how bad the damage was. And it was unbelievable to see that we were still remotely productive, and that things transpired that year, and that as much came from the farm as it did. But we produced things that nobody else was producing. So we had, as soon as we produced them, we had an ability to sell every single thing that we produced, and there was no risk involved. And that's there's there's many facets that became really helpful from being a produce manager here locally, and specifically, before starting the farm.
That's great. Can you talk about? I'm really fascinated by this idea of, like you mentioned, like cooling vegetables, the right size bunches. Like, how can you talk about some ways that's kind of manifested itself on the farm?
Yeah, totally. And so like appearance standards and just like regular SOPs, it's really allowed us to create a marketable vegetable. And so, yeah, like when our post-harvest practices are just so tight, like we pump from 250 feet at like 40-degree water year round. And so our cold tanks are are ice cold in the middle of summer when it's 90 degrees. And so when we're out in the field and we're harvesting greens, first thing in the morning, we get them into that cold station or in that cold tub, and we use just like a big Rubbermaid 100-gallon trough. And we dunk them in there, and you'll see life come back into vegetables and in ways that you've never seen it before. It's like, they become so crisp and so vital that we run them through that, and then we get them through like one of those Mr. Green salad spinners, and then we get them into the walk-in cooler. Yeah, I mean, like if at its hottest point post-harvest, from the field to that cold tub, and then through the salad spinner, it goes directly into a walk-in cooler, and then from the walk-in cooler, it jumps right into a sprinter. We bought just a sprinter, a box fan sprinter, and I built an 8x8 walk-in cooler in the back of it with a cool bot, and so we literally jump it out of our walk-in cooler and then throw the cold veg right into that, and then we keep it at 35 degrees the whole time we're at market, when it's 90 degrees out. And so it, like the cost benefit analysis on something like that for us is, it's, like we're preserving all of those vegetables. There's no risk of loss when we take to market, and then we can continue to offer that stuff because it's never been exposed to temperatures above 35 or 36 degrees at post-harvest. And so it allows us to really continue to bring super high quality vegetables wherever we go, and it allows us to take the risk too while we're watching like our markets really increase. And then the demand for our produce really increased. Like I can, sometimes push, 20% extra or 30% extra bagged, spring mix or spinach or arugula and some of the more sensitive stuff that I wouldn't dare take to market otherwise, because we've got all of this, the cold chain is so tight. And so, yeah, like it didn't take much infrastructure. It didn't take much time, and the expense on it wasn't really that high for what we get in return of just making sure that we're offering the highest quality, perfectly ice cold, crisp, fresh vegetables that we can. And we've developed a really good relationship with our customer base because of that, and relationship with our wholesale accounts because of that.
That's great. You said the Sprinter, is that just a trailer?
A Sprinter is like so it's a model that Mercedes makes, but they kind of it's like one of the big box fans that you see that FedEx drives around or something like that, but it's got actually like an actual box on the back of it, so it looks more like a moving truck. But it's, I think it's 21 foot length in total, including the front cab, and then the back cab is an 18 foot box essentially, and then I just built 8, or maybe it's a 16 foot box, and then 8 feet of it is we use for all cold storage, and then the other 8 feet on the front side we use, like that's where we pack all of our market stuff up. So our canopies are in there, like all of our display tables and all of that stuff are all packed up in there, and then like things that don't require being cold that like can be detrimental when they're getting refrigerated, we put in there. So when tomatoes are in season and things like that, we never put them in the walk-in cooler, but we never get them below 50 degrees. So we put them into that side cab and haul them to market that way, just to keep the flavor on them really bright. But there's like all that information that, and things that I don't even think about that have really exposed themselves, as to the benefit of working in that post-harvest handling kind of environment with the produce department. And it repays the farm in so many ways. So like young aspiring farmers or people that are kind of looking to get into their local ag community, like a local food co-op in the produce department, a legit one that's supporting the local community is a wonderful, wonderful way to get started. At least it's been for us.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that. I love that idea of working with produce from that side. It's like working in a restaurant too, right? Like if you're cooking, you kind of get to know how a chef may use produce or how they may like it. So yeah, working on the produce end of a retail establishment sounds brilliant. I want to talk about marketing a little bit more. Can you talk a little bit more about where your produce is going? Or actually, you know how we could do this, maybe talk a little bit about where you were selling your food and then how COVID has changed that, if it has.
Yeah, Kasey, you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we definitely, like most farms across the country, saw a decrease in our wholesale orders when all of the restaurants closed back in March. But, for us, in March and late spring or early spring, I suppose at that point, all of our produce really sells out at the farmers market that we started. So back in 2018, we started a year-round farmers market since we decided we had just completed our first full peak season, and it was, nearing the end of September at that point, and we knew that we were going to produce in our greenhouses, which is about 30,000 square feet total worth of produce.
No, 9,000 square feet. Sorry.
Oh, that's right. 3,000 per. Yes, that's right. Gosh, I wish. I'm jumping ahead. But we decided to start a farmers market that would operate in the winter. And it would also be like the only farmers market in our area in northern Nevada, really, that focuses on sustainable producers. So having kind of production standards around what people are bringing to market. And so we launched that in October of 2018, and then we sold through that. And we just, at this point, we have enough demand that we can't, we might have a little bit of extra of one thing or the other that, we're slowly getting people to warm up to, like dandelion greens. We definitely have our caveat of customers who just buy as many as they can. But, so we might have a little bit extra of things like that would go to a chef after our markets in March. But when that finished, when the markets all got shut down and the restaurants shut down, we kind of quickly, like within a week, pivoted to home delivery. And so everything went direct at that point. And it was amazing. I mean, I think that, the fervor that we saw nationwide around growing your own food was very much parallel to the fervor for supporting your local farmer. And I think that it spoke to the awareness that our public has to how delicate our food system is. And that obviously was in your face, like when you go to any supermarket and see all of these empty shelves, especially in like the fresh departments, et cetera, in the toilet paper aisle, but that's another story. But I think that people have this kind of, this really firm awareness around how delicate that is and how important it is to connect with your farmer if you're not going to be able to grow all of your own food. And so, I similar to what a lot of small farms that already had direct-to-customer sales channels, we saw a huge increase in demand. I mean, we could not meet the demand with what we already were producing. And then we maintained that home delivery. It wasn't kind of anything that we were going to stop because there's a lot of people who order from us who literally haven't left their homes since March because they're high risk and they're still too concerned about exposure. And they were the ones who were most verbose in their appreciation for us moving to that system. And so we've maintained it. It's not, our preference is to just bring everything to market. It's a lot easier. It's much less labor and logistics and infrastructure and all of the above. But so from a marketing, in terms of our sales channels, right now, I would say as we enter the winter season, we are, Zach, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say we're 90% direct sales right now. And then we do about 10%, and that might shift actually. Maybe it's more 25% now wholesale. Would you say that's right, Zach? 75 direct?
Yeah, I would say 25% direct to consumer, or 25% is the wholesale, the co-op, and direct to restaurants, and then 75% now for us is market and delivery.
Yeah, and then when it first started, when the shutdown happened in March up here, it was almost nothing wholesale. I mean, we couldn't actually produce anything for wholesale because we were selling out so completely on our online store that was for home delivery. And so our local co-op was really knocking on our door asking for anything that we had extra, but we just didn't have it. And so, that was, and from what we've heard from other local farms that are, small, family-owned organic farms, that was a pretty common story.
Yeah. So the farmers market is still going. It's just not at the same capacity.
Yeah, our farmers market did pause. We had to stop the farmers market in March because it's on public property, and so the city just had a mandate, and we decided not to lobby for being categorized as an essential business, even though we had the opportunity to do that. Really, just practically speaking, because the time that I had allotted for our children to be taken care of so that I could produce the farmers market each week was completely swallowed up with me now handling the logistics of our home delivery. And so I just didn't have the bandwidth, or the actual time to produce both. So we paused the farmers market over the summer, and then we reinvigorated it once we had one main market and then one kind of smaller market, farmers market in our area, operate over the summer. And when those closed at the end of September, I revived the year-round farmers market that we had to pause. And so now that is back in action. And I would say it's comparable. I mean, our sales there are better than they ever have been, but that's also a function of just the just the natural growth that we've had in terms of increased awareness of our farm and of our market. And so yeah, I wouldn't actually say it's been reduced. And I think that's also helped by the fact that we're the only market happening in the winter. And so we get all of the interest for people who like to go to the farmers market this time of year. And then yeah, so now it's really just the wintertime production for us. It isn't a matter of whether we can sell our produce, but as if we can grow enough to even nominally reach the demand that is present.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe you could give us a little bit more detail on that, what online platform you've used and how you sort of do the logistics there.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was definitely quite the game of trial and error. We use Square. Our point of sale at farmers markets has always been Square, and we're comfortable with their system. We really enjoy their applications in general. They're really their customer service has always been excellent, and they are really quick with their updates and the evolution of their softwares. We actually feel very like some kinship to them. They've grown their platform really quickly, and we feel like we've also kind of experimented and grown in a similar trajectory. So anyways, we stuck with them for our online store, and I did experiment a bit with some more farm-specific software, specifically Barn to Door, which is an awesome platform, and they have incredible customer service. But we found that Square actually fit our model better, just because we have a really unique way of packing. Specifically, is kind of where we decided to go back to Square. We use the Square online store open for specific hours. So we actually open ours on Tuesday afternoon and we close it on Thursday morning. And then we export those orders, and then I manipulate them on a spreadsheet so that I can basically kind of like a mail merge style, put them into a third-party program that will organize that information into labels for packing. And then we use those labels for packing as our pack list as well. And then Zach organizes the harvest side of that, making sure that everything's prepared for packing and obviously harvested to order, et cetera. He uses actually just the, right in the Square mobile app is just a really clear itemized breakdown of sales, the number of items per category. So he can see how many bags of salad mix he has to prepare, et cetera. And so then I've got the labels all ready to go, and our team basically uses each label to, pack each custom box. And then those labels also have all of the delivery information, which is helpful because we have a different team for home delivery. And then, we also use a third-party app called Routific for planning the routes for our drivers, to make that as kind of efficient as cost saving as possible. And I definitely recommend that app. But I've looked into, there's 8 really main ones out there that are route planners. And although Routific is one of the 2 more expensive ones, I've found that it's really worth the cost. And we charge $5 per delivery. And so it absolutely covers the cost of the drivers whom we pay. We pay them $15 per hour now because they're employees, and so they're covered under our workers' comp, et cetera. But we were originally starting them as contractors, and we were paying them $20 an hour. And the delivery fee, it covers all of our overhead. Yeah, and so that's kind of how we manage the home delivery system. It's definitely been a learning curve. I think that the hardest part for us as we got it going was the tedious nature of spreadsheet manipulations that happen after you export all of your orders. Yeah, and that's probably too detailed for this kind of this interview, but I think that Square is a really smart place for people to begin, because it's free. Like, you can essentially set up your system for free. Obviously, you have your processing fees, but you don't have to pay up front to get it going. And their interface is very intuitive, and their interface for the customer is very familiar. So many different companies use Square that people are used to that. So I would recommend that.
Yeah, that's great. And that Routific is, for the listener, ROUTIFIC, like Routific. That's cool. Yeah, that's cool. I haven't checked that one out, but that's a great to hear that endorsement. Okay, so I'd like to get into a little bit of soil management and those sorts of things. And maybe we could just start in the field, and maybe Zach, if you want to, give us a description of your soil management practices and the sort of philosophy behind it, I suppose.
Like Kasey mentioned, we were really heavily influenced by Jean-Martin Fortier, and it really inspired by him at the beginning of the farm. And so the BCS kind of Elliot Coleman influence that he brings with him became an integral part of our production system. And I think that at that point we were really starting to see, and this is, I guess, 2018, we were starting to see like what it looked like for one person to operate an acre and a half in conjunction with a couple of volunteers. And I was completely overwhelmed, I was in over my head. I ran drip irrigation on the entire field. And at that point, that was an acre and a quarter outdoors, a drip. And I strung it all up, got it all set myself, and started planting things without really like any idea aside from what I'd read in Jean-Martin Fortier's Market Gardener, with his timeline. So I was just really throwing things in the field, like trying to get things to work out. And then when they didn't, I would just run it over with the BCS and then plant something else. And, and I kept trying like that. And what I saw into, I guess, at the end of the 2018 season was that the mechanization of that made it so that it was possible for me to operate, because I could just literally just till everything in. But the real caring aspect of and nurturing of the soil, I wasn't achieving, and I didn't feel good about it. I felt like I was just like a lot of my criticisms of the big scale, whether it's organic or conventional ag, is that they synthesize the environment, and there really isn't much connectivity underneath, and so you don't have like all that mycorrhizal network and all the microorganisms working to your advantage. You're not like working with them. You're really just giving the soil exactly what it needs for every crop, and like NPK fertilizers and just the right amount of clay and soil conditioners, and then you're just imitating that and planting right into it over and over and over again. But it's not the way that I've seen that it should or could be. And so we're really inspired by the fact that our kids could come out and farm this land, and that this land would be in better health, and the soil would be in better health than when we found it. And so because of that, we've really aggressively worked towards what we can see as being the most natural cycle, or an imitation of what nature would do, like on these native kind of hedgerows in the forest where vegetables would originally grow. And we're deeply inspired by Zach Bush and the work that he's doing, and no-till soil management and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of factors that merged to kind of create our stance, or our approach and philosophy to soil management. But it's pretty much, I mean, in this last season was the first season that we I guess 2019 we did no-till, 2020 was 100% no-till, but we have gone as far as like chopping all of the brassicas off at the roots, allowing the root system to decompose, covering that with about a ½ inch or a ¼ inch of compost, running about 3 soil tests per season, just to continue to make sure that we're heading in the right direction. I'm using azomite as a rock phosphate just once per season on pretty much all of the beds, and then we're supplementing a bit with NPK fertilizers on the big heavy feeders, I mean that's pretty much the basis of it. But we're really looking we chop down the crops pretty much when we're done to mulch the bed, and then like when the melons or zucchinis and a lot of the summer crops are done, we literally just stack compost on those beds to allow it to decompose, and then we'll run them with a tilther in the spring just to flatten the bed surface, and then we're plugging away from there, either direct seeding the crops out or transplanting the crops out. But yeah, our soil management and soil health has gone from, I guess, organic matters. When we started the farm, it was about 1.2%, and it's up over 6% now, and that's in 4 seasons. We applied almost 100 yards of organic compost this season to the farm, and we look to get it to a space where it's, that homeostasis kind of stays there. But we saw a huge transition, from 2018 to 2019, and then 2019 to 2020, and this last year where we had almost no pest problems at all. And anything that we did was easy to mitigate. Where we've never sprayed a chemical or and even an OMRI certified pesticide, herbicide, or fungicide on the farm, and so we take a lot of pride in that, and just making sure that we give the plants the space that they need to be productive. Like in row spacing on the kales, as opposed to doing 3 and pack them as tightly as you can on a 30-inch bed. We run 2 rows at 18 inches, and it sounds like a lot of times that it won't be as productive, but we've actually, we averaged 130 bunches per 100-foot bed on kale this year, in a 3 or 4 week rotation between dino and curly kale. And I mean, that for us was extremely productive, especially being that we planted the same, and harvested the same plants from May all the way through October and into early November. And so I think that the less stress that you put on the plants and the less stress that you put on the soil, and you allow it to kind of to do its own thing. And I mean, from photosynthesis, to measuring the bricks in the plants, to deter all of the aphids because they can't eat those high sugar plants, or when they're producing like that. The more we're tapped into that, and the less we're synthesizing it, I think the closer that we're going to get to regenesis and creating a farm that our kids can farm on, and they can take pride in, and it'll be something that'll nurture them and their families.
Yeah, that's great. I definitely think space is extremely valuable, and that's even coming from somebody that, proper spacing, and that's even coming from somebody who really likes to interplant and cram as many things into an area as possible. They do need a little bit of breathing room. I do find that a lot of crops, especially the brassicas, tend to benefit so much from not trying to cram too heavily. You mentioned NPK. What are some of the fertilizers that you're sort of leaning towards, or that you've found to be the most effective in your context?
Yeah, and so we used a slow release and a fast release pelleted fertilizer historically. We use a Nature Safe 855 has been one that we've used as kind of an all-around fertilizer. But we've gone from like alfalfa meal, cottonseed meals, fish meal, bone meal, and then even pelleted chicken manure. And just trying to find like what really works best for our systems. I'm really intrigued by the Australian doctor that you did the interview with, the 2 interviews with, the summer short one, which was like 15 minutes, which is like the best teaser I think I've ever listened to for photosynthesis and just like understanding like the crop seeds. And then the last one that you did with her was just, I mean, it blows my mind to think that, from these I mean like the EM1 is one that we use, but as a microbial inoculant or a soil stimulant for microbes. It's just molasses and microbes, but like that you could get away with that, and that if you could teach the soil just like and get it necessarily alive again, that the soil will then produce all of the everything that it needs. Like you don't need to supplement. And I'm trying as hard as I can see that. And like for me, it's like the protein complex. Like when I don't feel good in my body, I'm like, man, I got to eat more protein. And I think that that's just something that's like been trained into me, as opposed to thinking like, oh, I should drink more water, or I need more vegetables or fruits. Like I think that as I look at the soil and I have that same kind of experience, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's some aphids. We're short on nitrogen. And even knowing I said, like, like I soil tested it, I made sure everything was good, and that there's a slew of other things that could potentially be wrong. Like my first instinct is to tend to want to amend the soil and put nitrogen in it. And I'm trying to get away from that. And I just think that it's a way for big ag to make money off of small farmers, and that, it's so much better to work into like cover crops and to really understand photosynthesis, and to get, like the right amount of diversity into the beds. And I'm trying to like figure out the interplanting strategies and the timing on that, and all of that, to maximize photosynthesis and to maximize ground coverage. Because I just want to, like, if we can imitate as much as nature and not leave things bare on these beds, you see that when you like uncover, like right now it's probably 43 degrees out, but I've got all of this mulch all over all these beds, and the brassicas and the melons and the zucchini, and I go and I uncurl that, and it's layered with compost, and you can see the life still teeming in the soil there. And that to me is indicative that I'm heading the right direction. And if I think that we could, if I could pull further away from being dependent on big ag and their like infiltration, and more dependent on being autonomous and self-sustaining, I'm really interested in that. But I don't have the solution to that yet. Like, and I like lean on people's Instagram feeds and listening to your podcast and just hearing where other people are at, and like, and where we could potentially go. But I'm definitely looking for the best models to follow out there in that sense.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I feel like when I think of a fertility program now, I think in much broader terms, like what is, thinking more about the microbiology, thinking more about like, moisture levels, where's the water coming from, thinking more about mulch layers, are they adequate, and less about nitrogen, because, nitrogen's all around your roots. And if you have the good microbiology there, that, they'll be able to fix that nitrogen, more easily. So, yeah, but I feel like at the same time, it's good to sort of have those things as a tool to figure it out. The alfalfas and et cetera.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like I'm like really aggressive, and like I work real hard, and like I kind of like I find problems, and I'm like a real like, all right, this is the fix for it, and then I go all into it, and then I make terrible mistakes, and things that like, it's like just almost like ruin the farm. And that tends to be like my mentality. Like I go all into everything I do, and so I think that also allows me to like, it amplifies my inquiry into solving the problems, and to like, and really figuring out like holistic management, at least what that looks like for our farm. And so, yeah, I think it's just a necessary step, like that we all go through, and that, like we're all kind of out there just trying to find the solutions and doing the best we can with the tools that we have. And it's important to like, for me to stay super humble and to continue to like see that I know so little and I have so much to learn, because I feel that way all of the time. When you just continue to make mistakes, it's really good for me, because it keeps me humble, and it keeps me grateful for when things do work too.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I love how open people are to share what has worked and what hasn't. Especially like in terms of soil biology and interplanting and all these other things that we've talked about. It's so helpful to be able to hear that and dive into people's systems. Speaking of that, I'm wondering if we could talk about some vegetable specifics. Before we got going, we were talking about your sort of root vegetable. Is something you excel at. Can you kind of give us the arc of that? What were you maybe doing before that was working okay, and then like how have you improved on that? And you can use any of those vegetables that we mentioned.
Okay, yeah, I think that like the most significant improvement is probably the cedars, and figuring out what cedars work best for us. And so, yeah, we started off using the earthway seeder as a direct seeder, and we're pulling on a 100-foot bed. Let's say we could just use carrots as a good example because they can be great money makers, but we really were hoping to get those right. And I think that when we started on the earthway, we were getting about 125 bunches off of a 100-foot bed. And, if you're selling those for $4 a bunch, you get about $500 in revenue for a 90-day crop. And that for us is the majority of our season. And so I really started to look into that and think like there has to be ways for us to be more productive. And we actually signed up early on to do the Never Sink Farm course, and with Connor Crickmore that he hosts, and he kind of comes from the Elliott Coleman, or is deeply inspired by Elliott Coleman and some of his tools, and that actually turned me on to the 4-row seeder. And instead of doing things like the carrots we were doing on 5 rows, like John Martini suggested in the Market Gardener, we started doing our peak season carrots on 4 rows, and on the seed plate, and not using pelleted seed because of the germination stuff that we were having really big germination problems using pelleted carrot seeds. And so I went to raw seed and doing 4 rows on a 30-inch bed of carrots, and we saw a production increase to almost 1,000 bunches on a 100-foot bed, and at $4 a bunch, I mean that's way over our square foot, or what we look at for per row foot production. But yeah, we at $3, we ideally would achieve about $3,000 a 100-foot bed on the farm every season if we could, but that's kind of just like a dollar value that we peeking to do to see if our production values are worth it, and what crops that we're growing, and what are meeting our minimums and what aren't. But anyway, that allowed us to overachieve on those carrot beds, and so we carried that over into planting, like direct seeding, like all of our brassica lettuce mixes, all like baby greens, all the radishes, and pretty much almost every direct seeded crop with the exception of scallions and spinach, which we use the Jang seeder for now, but are all run through that 4-row seeder, and we've seen the productivity increase on those. Like, I mean, it's insane. What it's almost 100-fold on most beds, and simple things like radishes. But as it allows us to allot a 50-foot or a 30-foot bed instead of a 100-foot bed when we're doing French breakfast radishes, or the Easter egg radishes early in the season or late in the fall. And so the cedar in general for us has been the most significant improvement, I think, in our production and that realization. Around crop specific stuff, for us, moving away from drip irrigation, especially on direct seeded crops, we have dramatic temperature fluctuations where we can fluctuate 60 degrees in a day, but in a week span, we can go from 90 to 20 in early spring or in early fall. 90-degree high Fahrenheit and then 20-degree low Fahrenheit, and because of that, like our irrigation programs, we need 100% or as close to 100% coverage on all these beds, and that also doesn't include the fact that we're like I said, at 5,200 feet and getting just winds that you would not believe. Like last week, we had a shutter on one of the end walls in the greenhouse just completely taco. It like folded right in half over the middle bar.
Wow.
Because the winds are so strong. It was up over 80 miles an hour where we were, and we've actually seen 100-mile-an-hour gusts on farm. So the way that comes through in germination is insane. And so like even in the middle of winter right now, like we're 15 or 20 degrees every night, or late fall where we are right now, and we'll see 15 to 20 degrees every night, and the ground stays relatively frozen. But if I notice that it's drying out, like I'll turn the sprinklers on and I'll soak the beds in so that we don't lose all the topsoil. We're working on hedgerows, and we planted about 5,000 plants or 5,000 trees as a wind perimeter for the farm, but that was like 3 years ago, and a lot of the conifers and stuff are up and the elderberry shrubs are coming up, but they're like 10 years away from, from actively working as a wind block or barrier for the farm. And so, right now we're really relying heavily on the right sprinklers and the right irrigation and just the right amount of moisture to keep everything down. And so, we went through a ton of sprinklers and irrigation systems and ended on the Senegal wobblers. I actually went to those and then went into some Netafim mega nets and some other stuff and came back to the Senegars, and I just put them on a 100-foot bed. I put them like 10 feet off the front of the bed and then spaced, I think they're every 17 and a half feet or something out throughout the bed. And I run the blue inserts for them for maximum coverage. And it means I can only run one zone at a time with that pressure and the amount of water that comes out. But I tend to soak these beds out and put the irrigation on them for like 3 hours, and then I don't irrigate for 3 or 4 days. And even in peak season up here, like when it's 90 or 95 degrees, I find that to be the best method for us. And the Senegal wobblers is the best sprinkler on the market for overall coverage for us, and that helps us achieve like all of our ends. And I guess in addition to that, I also use agricultural burlap. And I cover the tops of the beds after we seed them, and that's something that we took from Singing Frog Farms. And they just put ag burlap right after they direct seed their crops, because it doesn't, it allows it so that the soil isn't exposed, for 2 weeks when it comes to a carrot crop. It helps hold the soil temperatures for us and the dramatic fluctuations, and it acts as a wet blanket. And so we've seen, just another boon, another 10% or 15% increase in germination with those, especially on the more volatile crops, but with the agricultural burlap. And so that's that is kind of our recipe for success for the direct seeding crops is the proper seeder, making sure that the hydration is just right, and then the agricultural burlap is a wonderful addition, just to like making sure that you get that 10% in the fronts and the backs and the corners of all the beds, because if you lose that on every bed, you're already doing the work. You might as well capitalize on it and get all that germination in if you can. So we really look to kind of to close in that 10 or 15% loss that most of the time we just write off.
Right. So just so that people are clear on this, when you're using that 4-row seeder and you're doing 4 rows in a 30-inch bed of carrots, you're doing every other space on the 4-row seeder, right? Like you're not doing just a 4-row straight down the center.
No, yeah, totally.
Right? So you're adding, it's basically like you're adding more space.
Yeah, so
between
and I'm
rows.
doing them so tight that the carrots are touching each other. Like the brushes are what will determine that. And I made the mistake. I had some Napoli's that came from Johnny's this year, and the carrot seeds are so big that I didn't change the seed plate in it, but I should have gone from the C to the D plate. But that, and then the brush, if you adjust the brush, that'll determine your seed drop. But I just keep the brushes lightly touching the metal post or the pole in it, and I don't really adjust the brushes too much unless there's a really sensitive crop like watermelon radishes that really want some space and it should be single seeded. I don't really use that to singulate seed. I use it to usually group seed, and so I expect it to drop 2 or 3 seeds per drop. And so when those carrots come up, they're on 4 rows. And this is from Connor Crickmore. This is from Neversink. But those rows are so tight that the carrots are touching, but there's enough room from side to side for them to fluctuate and to butt each other, or just to move each other around. And so I do on the first and the fourth in the 4-row seeder, and then I put them about 1.5 inches up off the string on these 30-inch beds. And so I always string the beds before we seed them out like that, just so that they're defined. And then when I put them in, I run the 4-row seeder about 1.5 inches off that string. And it's in the first and then the fourth seeders on that 4-row, and then I'll walk that down, and then when I come up the other side, I take it 1.5 inches up off that string again, and so that way it's about equal spacing, and that allows us to really weed them out. About 6 days in, I'll flame weed the bed, and then that's on carrots specifically, 6 days. And then we'll flame weed that bed out. But when those 4 rows are there, like even if I'm in a zone that we use those silage tarps on, because we rotate those silage tarps around the farm and try to leave them on a bed for a year, to really minimize all the grass and all the weed pressure that we've had up here, and that's been really helpful. But even if we're in a zone like that, I'll still see weed or grass seed come up in it, and it allows me to really weed the beds super easy, with just a walk of a hoe in between the rows, and you could weed out a carrot bed in 10 or 15 minutes, completely when you have a lot of space between them. But when we had them on 5 rows, weeding them, you have to hand weed most of the time because the tools couldn't get in between, and we'd spend 40 minutes or 45 minutes on one bed sometimes.
Hey, just jumping in real quick to get a word from our sponsors like Tilth Soil. Tilth Soil makes NOP-compliant living potting soils in Cleveland, Ohio, with food scraps they haul and compost themselves. Each batch of soil is tested against the competitors, and the results are in. Plants vote for Tilth Soil. Order October through December for the 2021 growing season and get 10% off at tilthsoil.com. And I should add that I have used it myself, and I will use it again. It is a great product. Today's show is also brought to you by you, the listeners. You all are incredible. If you like this show, if you appreciate the work we're doing at No-Till Growers, or like the new podcast that we started with No-Till Flowers, or some of the other podcasts that you haven't heard about yet, or our video work that's coming up in 2021, any of that, please consider signing up to be a patron at patreon.com/no-till-growers, because that really helps us out. That is our main funding, but also at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to Rimmel Greenhouse Systems, Scott Snodgrass, Jody Miller, Shane and Emma of Aslan Organics, Travis and Heidi of Arcadia Acres, Jean-Martin Fortier, and Yannick LaPlante. Huge thanks to all of our show supporters at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Also, thank you to everyone who just kicks in a couple bucks on Venmo to @no-till-growers. One note, quick, towards the end of this episode, there is a little blip in the audio, but it'll only last a minute. And there are also several kid cameos, but that's kind of how we roll in this podcast. We're cool with that. And it's also pretty reflective of what it's like to farm with kids. So anyway, back to the interview. Yeah, that's great. And I'm glad you clarified that on the first and fourth hole for the slot for the 4 row. Yeah, that's super cool. I love that spacing, just the idea of packing them in to the row and then giving them more space, and making the whole thing easier, especially in terms of weeding. Can we, before we kind of, as we start to wrap up, I'd love to hear a little bit more about employee and employee management, because it sounds like with the amount of things you're doing, you have, a lot of systems in place. Can you talk about how many employees you have, and then some of the things that you utilize to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page?
Yeah. So in daily operations, I mean, it used to give me so much anxiety. I used to get so stressed out about getting up and getting out into the field, especially when we weren't living out here, and trying to get everything prepped for everybody to come out and work, and so we ran with 3 full-time staff in 2019. And then, which were friends, and like that we barely had enough money to pay everybody. We were barely like getting by, and we were just doing the best that we could with it. And I mean, I should say, and we maybe should have started a podcast at this, but like we have so much gratitude for all the help and all the folks that came out to like really help launch this and put so much time and energy into making this possible. And like all the wisdom holders and people that have like shared all this information, and just so selflessly. It's such a big deal. But yeah, we would not be where we're at today if it wasn't for just the firm commitment of a special group of people that have really made this happen. So thank you to them. And the staff that we had that first year in 2019 was a 3 full-time staff that consisted mostly of friends, and they got to like witness all my breakdowns and tantrums and heartache on a weekly basis, because we were still experimenting so much and things were so fragile that it just felt like everything was breaking all of the time. And it was because, like you're in a crash course of learning so many lessons, because we literally increased productivity 1,000% from 2018 to 2019. And because of that, it was just like, I felt like everything was melting. And that was a huge reveal for me, that I wasn't going to be able to continue going on like that and neither was the farm, and nobody was going to keep coming back to work, especially if they weren't friends of ours, and they didn't feel guilty about not working or coming back to help. And so, yeah, we just took a much more professional approach to it, where we started to develop task tickets, which is it's actually just a topographical map layout of the farm, and it's got all of the bed numbers in it, all of the greenhouses on it, and then it has like slots for 7 different tasks, the person's name, a date, and then sections for notes and feedback. And so every single day on the farm now, I'll go out, and before everybody gets here, I'll make the daily list, and I walk up and down every row. I look at every plant. It really allows me the time that it's needed, and something that like I would never have given myself before, but that has allowed the farm to really transform. And now I walk every row. I look at every plant. I'm watching the irrigation. I'm like, just a total functional part or expression of the farm at that point, and I feel like I'm really in tune with it. And then I make notes from that, and I bring those notes back, and I create task tickets for everybody to operate from every day. And so now we're running with 5 full-time staff on 1.5 acres in peak season. And this time of year, we have about 60 labor hours in farm-specific operations, and that doesn't include the home delivery stuff, but it does include the farmers market. So yeah, our production really starts to slow down. But without those task tickets, and like that daily walk around for me, it would just still continue to be a total nightmare, and my experience of it would be something that wouldn't be sustainable for the long run. Like I'd be too stressed out to keep going.
And then, so you do the task tickets in the morning, everybody comes in. Is there like a meeting, or are you just doing kind of everybody knows, they grab their ticket and they go on about the day? Can you kind of describe that a little bit?
Yeah, totally. So when people get in, there's themes usually to the day. Like we tend to harvest the baby greens and the more perishable stuff that you could really tell is just vibrant and super fresh as late as we can, or as close to the markets and as close to the deliveries as we can. And so in peak season, we'll have a full day of roots, a full day of salad greens, a full day of bunch greens, a full day of tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers. And so we pretty much see every day according to when it makes the most sense for the farm. And so once the staff is here, like 100% of our staff came back that worked in 2019 came back for 2020. And so, yeah, it was really indicative that we transformed. I may have said that wrong earlier. It was 2018 where we had 3 full-time staff. Then 2019, we had 4 full-time staff. If I didn't say that correctly earlier, that's what I meant to say. And then 100% of the staff that worked last year came back for 2020 season. So I think that was indicative that we were culturing like a good environment, and that things had changed, because nobody came back from 2018 to 2019. But now that everybody was so familiar with the farm, they would walk in and they could plug right into their task tickets. And if that wasn't the case, I was definitely really involved in that part of the process, where I'd get out to the field and I'd show everybody, kind of pick through standards. And I still do that. Like I haven't successfully let go at all. Like I'm still very much involved and rooted in harvesting, and I'm trying to get further away from that, just so that I could observe, because I find that's where I make the best decisions from, and I could see the greater picture of the farm. But that still isn't. I'm still definitely far from that. And so I'm out in everybody's ear all day, and looking at everything, helping them wash, helping them pack. If I see somebody falls behind, we get them through harvest, and so there's lots of camaraderie in there. But for the most part, I find that people work really well with standardized time limits, and so we give on a half bed of carrots, or it's more like how many bunches, but you just say if there's 400 bunches in a half bed or a 50-foot bed of carrots, then our production value per hour should be this, which we look to achieve about $130 is the minimum per person. But if that's viable, and that's usually done on a weekly basis for us, where we reconcile that. But on a daily basis for a person, whether out harvesting in the field, we could say You could do a bunch a minute, let's say. And on most things that carries over. So I'll give someone, if I know that there's 400 bunches out there, then we'll say it'll take, 4 hours or something like that, 6 hours for the person to do. And sometimes when tasks are really overwhelming, I'll space it out so that somebody doesn't get stuck doing carrots for 6 hours in one day. And it's rather easier for them to do half of the bed, and another person will come through and do the other half later in the day. Just to keep like energy fresh and things flowing and people feeling like confident and able and not like falling in the wormhole of 6 hours of carrots and what that'll do to you sometimes.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to be, I love how thoughtful you are about that. That makes a lot of sense. Can we maybe get one more question? You mentioned having 2 young kids, and I'm curious if you all have developed a sort of techniques for managing did you say 2 and a 5-year-old, which is pretty much what we have on the farm, and what your strategies are. Maybe that.
Yeah, they're constantly changing strategies, but lately it's been a combination of princess dresses and compost piles. Yeah, it's kind of, their interests change almost as quickly as I come up with ideas. But yeah, I think that lately, one of the things that we definitely noticed when we moved out here was just the novelty of having so many diverse landscapes, even if it is just an acre and a half, but, each little area of like 20 by 30 feet is like a landscape for their small world. And we allow them to range over this acre and a half, which is definitely not something I anticipated when I was imagining us living out here, but it became just a natural, I guess, allowance that we had. It was kind of something that we had to do by design in order for us both to be productive in certain moments, and we both had to have our hands on something, like packing, for instance, packing orders. But yeah, we've found that being out here has given them a lot of distractions, I guess is the right way to say it. We did create like a little play area for them that has, just like one of those jungle gym style things with a slide and swings. But of course, like after a month of that being out here, that becomes much less of an attractive thing. And the compost pile kind of always wins. I will say that last year for Christmas, we bought one of those, I don't know what they're called.
Power wheels?
The little cars for kids. What are they? Power wheels. That's right. Yeah, power wheels. We got Anjali, our older daughter, that. And that's been kind of consistently helpful because she can just drive around the farm. And in the wintertime, she can really... Oh, there they are. Yeah, they can, kind of follow us around, and they can also drive over tarps and over fields that they previously had to kind of maneuver around. And so, yeah, I don't know. I think that each farm is going to, or each family rather, yours included, I'm sure, is so dependent on like what the interest of the hour is. And their personalities, like our older daughter is just pure fire and is just always headed wherever she's headed, she's sprinting, So keeping up with her has never been easy. And then our younger daughter is much more content to just like explore something in a stationary place. And if we had started the farm with her, I think I would have been like, sure, let's have 4 kids. But luckily it was not that scenario. So yeah, so it's a changing answer, I think. But lately the compost pile combined with princess outfits and then our power wheels have been really helpful.
That's a great combo. The compost pile it wins every time. It's like a magnet. We also have a trampoline, and it's like a giant playpen. And sometimes I see photos of people's farms, and I'm like, oh, I see your trampoline, because it's worth it. It's so worth it. It's like the best. It's been the best toy. They just want to go straight outside to the trampoline.
That's really well timed. Yeah, we've actually been going back and forth on whether we would do a trampoline this Christmas as their gift. And so I'm glad you're saying that, pushing us towards the yes on that one. Funny.
Yeah, we did last year. We did a trampoline and we did a sandbox. And those two things, I mean, the trampoline wins out, but the sandbox was like a good, addition. Especially when they got tired of each other on the trampoline, one would go to the sandbox. But yeah, no, it's a winner.
It reminds me of the Full Belly Farms, and we did a lot of farm work with them. I mean, they're such a mothership or an incubator farm for just inspiration out here on the West Coast. And then we went out there and spent some time with her, and I you could see that they had really brought their children up on the farm and what that did for them. And it was one of those environments where the kids kind of went away, it seemed like, to college and got into some other stuff, and then everybody decided to come back to the farm because they realized that maybe life had never been that good, or it was the place. And I think that having our kids out here with us and just having them be a part of what we're doing to make the world a better place, and what we're doing to sustain ourselves is really inspirational and is really a big deal for them. And I think that intrinsic value is something that we probably can't even calculate, but I'm excited to see what it does for their lives, because I think I crave that, growing up in the cities.
Yeah, I agree. And I love hearing those stories when the original farm owners raise a kid on the farm, the kid goes off and then comes back. I mean, that's the story of Clara Coleman. That's the story at Oxton Organics. They do kind of have to go off and do their own thing, but that's the dream, is making this job and this lifestyle interesting and fun enough for them at a young age where they may want to do it when they're older.
Yeah,
absolutely. And it kind of draws the question forward of, there's so much talk out there of the average age of the farmer and how, so few of their descendants are wanting to come back. And I think there's something, although farming in general has this romantic charm culturally, I think there's something to be said about what life is really like on the farm versus a large scale, conventional or organic, but just a humongous farm versus a small family farm, and which one really has a charm that pulls someone back to it, right?
Yeah. I mean, I know, having worked with a lot of those conventional farmers, around where we used to live, that they mostly just spent all of their time on a tractor. I mean, 10 hours a day all summer, or 12, and I just think to some extent that's fun. It's fun to go use a tractor sometimes, but when that's all the job boils down to, I think it's not as exciting anymore for people, for the younger generation. So there is something about having mama and papa around all the time, getting to play on the compost pile. Yeah, I think that's maybe it'll spark a different generation.
Yeah, I hope so.
Generational return.
Yeah, and having those relationships with customers too, I think it adds that element of feedback. That you not only having your hands in the soil, which is its own, microbial feedback that we probably don't understand fully at all, but yeah, I think that for us, we really do get fueled by our regulars that express so much appreciation for what we're doing, and that in itself creates, I think, a level of richness that is hard to find when you're a giant wholesaler farm. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think that if people are just doing it for different needs too, if you look at the prime motivators for most of us, it's not because we're trying to make X amount or produce X amount because we owe this amount or whatever that is. I think a lot of the smaller farms are fueled by passion and and some realization that food is medicine, and that taking care of the earth is the way, and that if we're not doing it, that literally that there won't be other folks to come after us to be able to sustain it. And so I think that a lot of us have this realization that there's just no other way to be in this world.
That's great. Well, Zach and Kasey, thank you so much for your time. I really have enjoyed this conversation immensely.
You too, Jesse. Thanks so much for making this happen, man. Yeah, it's such a treat.
All right, if you enjoyed that episode, make sure to follow Prema Farm and all the great work they're doing at all the places. I will hook it up with links in the show notes. They have the Instagram and all those. I will make sure those links are there. Also, make sure to subscribe to No Till Flowers wherever you get podcasts. You can also follow No Till Flowers at No Till Flowers on Instagram. And of course, subscribe to this podcast wherever you are getting it and leave a review. But this week, all reviews must give your New Year's resolutions, because I'm kind of struggling to come up with one this year, and I could use some ideas for something to give up for the first 2 weeks of January at least. Huge thank you to Jackson Roulette and Josh Satin for letting me use my theme music. Thank you to Willie Breeding for unleashing it on the world. Thank you, as always, to my amazing partner in farming and family and all the things, Hannah Crabtree. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week. Bye. Tell your daughters I said thank you.
All right, you too.
You too. All right. Bye now.